Sheriff Collins was a man carved from granite and grit, the kind of lawman whose word carried more weight than the badge can to his chest. Folks feared him just enough to stay honest and loved him just enough to sleep easy. I'd known him near 10 years, rode with him once or twice when things got hot, helped mend fence on his land when a fire tore through the north pasture. So when he rode into town one morning and asked if I'd watch over his ranch for a spell, I didn't hesitate. "Just a week," he said, tying off his stallion outside the saloon. "Got to ride out east, track a pair of brothers stole from a stage outside Laramie." He squinted at me through the dust, that hawk-eyed stare measuring something deeper than the surface. "It's not just the cattle I'm trusting you with." I knew what he meant. His wife, Eloise, was younger than him by a decade and beautiful in a way that didn't need explanation. Sharp eyes, proud chin, and a kind of quiet sadness she wore like perfume. "I understand," I told him, and I meant it. He clapped my shoulder once, firm as a judge's gavel, and rode off before the sun reached its peak. That first evening on the ranch, everything was still and golden. I walked the fence line, checked the livestock, made a fire near the bunkhouse. The sheriff's home sat higher on the hill, windows glowing faint against the dark. I could see her silhouette now and then, moving behind curtains, preparing supper maybe, or just passing time with a book and a bourbon. I kept my eyes down. The days that followed were routine, the kind of rhythm that lets a man think too much. I'd fix a busted post, feed the horses, and eat alone by the fire. She never came down to the bunkhouse, and I never went up the hill. We'd nod if we crossed paths, exchange a polite word, but nothing more. But something began to stir, unspoken and slow, like smoke from a distant blaze. It started with a glance too long, a smile held just past the edge of decency, the way her hand brushed mine one morning when I handed her a basket of eggs. Nothing a man could be punished for, but everything a man like me should have known better than to welcome. I told myself I was imagining it, told myself I'd never cross that line. But that night, as I lay awake listening to the coyotes cry out under a half-moon sky, I found myself wondering what perfume she wore and what she looked like without the sorrow in her eyes. It was the first time I felt the weight of that trust, and the first time I realized I might not be strong enough to carry it.
The storm came sudden, like all the bad things in life. No warning, no whisper of wind beforehand, just a rumble in the earth, a snap of dry heat, and then the sky cracked open like Judgment Day. By dusk, the ranch was swallowed in rain and mud. The horses kicked and whinnied in the stables, uneasy with the thunder. I'd just finished boarding the barn when the downpour got so thick it was hard to see the house from the bunkhouse steps. I stripped off my slicker and boots, hung 'em by the fire, and sat with a tin of coffee, the kind that burns bitterness into your throat. The wind howled through the slats like it had a grudge, and I was settling in to ride the storm out alone when there was a knock. Not loud, just a soft tap, once. Then again. I opened the door. There she stood, Eloise Collins. Rain poured off the brim of her hat, soaked a dress through so it clung to her like a second skin. Her dark hair was plastered to her cheeks, her lips trembling not from cold, but from something harder to name. The fire went out, she said. Whole place is freezing. I should have said no. I should have offered to come up and fix it, suggested she stay in town with the preacher's wife till the storm passed, anything but what I did. I stepped aside. She walked in like a shadow, slow and careful, dripping water onto the wooden floor. I tossed another log on the fire, watching her from the corner of my eye. She stood near the flames, her back to me, arms wrapped tight around herself. I didn't mean to intrude, she said softly. I didn't, I lied. There was something about the way the firelight danced across her dress, outlining every curve, every motion. My mouth went dry. You want a blanket? I asked, my voice cracked. She nodded. I fetched one from the cot, and when I turned back, she had taken off her hat and was unpinning her hair. It tumbled down her back in wet waves. I swallowed. She turned toward me slowly, arms still clutching herself. Her lips curled into a faint smile, not teasing, not shy, but knowing, like she saw something in me I hadn't admitted yet, like she knew I hadn't just let her in from the storm. I handed her the blanket, and our fingers touched, just a brush. But the room shifted. The air got heavier, warmer. She didn't say thank you. She just looked at me a moment too long. The silence was thicker than the thunder outside. I'll dry off near the fire, she murmured, stepping closer, her shoulder brushing mine. I nodded, but I didn't move. She stood so near I could smell her, rain and lavender and something faintly sweet, like peaches left too long in the sun. And I knew then the storm wasn't out there anymore. It was here, inside, and it had nothing to do with rain. She slipped the blanket from her shoulders like it weighed too much to carry. Beneath it, the cotton dress clung to her curves, soaked through and nearly translucent. She didn't speak as she reached behind her neck, fingers moving slowly, unfastening buttons one by one. I turned my back. Not out of virtue, I was already too far gone for that, but because I thought if I didn't see it, it wouldn't pull me under. I stared into the fire, trying to hold on to something decent in myself. You're quiet, she said behind me, voice low and soft. I reckon I don't know what to say, I replied, barely above a whisper. Then don't say anything. I heard the wet fabric slide to the floor, heard her bare feet move across the wooden planks toward the hearth. I clenched my jaw, my hands in fists on my knees. I'd been a lot of things in my life. A thief once, a brawler more than once, a man with regrets stacked higher than fence posts in winter. But I'd never betrayed a friend, never crossed a line I couldn't live with, until now. She sat down beside me without asking, close enough that our legs touched. Her skin was warm and damp against mine. She had the blanket wrapped around her, but just barely. The scent of her hair filled my lungs like a drug. I didn't move, didn't speak. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You ever feel that kind of loneliness, Mr. Witt? She hadn't called me that before, not formally. I swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, I do. She turned her face up to mine. Her eyes weren't innocent. They were tired, dark, hungry. We were both hungry. Her fingers traced my jaw, slow and light. You ever think about what it'd feel like to stop being lonely? I couldn't answer.
Didn't need to. My hand found her waist. I don't remember deciding to move it there, but there it was, holding her like she belonged to me. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned in, her lips parted slightly, breath warm against my neck. There was still time to stop, still space between us, the width of a heartbeat, the breadth of a prayer. But I didn't move. Neither did she. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't." She smiled. And still, neither of us moved. The fire cracked beside us, throwing shadows across the walls. Her hand slid across my thigh, slow and deliberate, and my breath caught. That was when I realized it wasn't just temptation anymore. It was invitation, and I was no longer resisting. I was waiting. We stayed like that, tangled in silence and heat, knowing full well we'd crossed the first real line, and that the next one was coming fast.
She kissed me like she'd been holding it back for years. There was no hesitancy, no fear, just fire and decision. Her lips found mine in a way that didn't ask permission and didn't offer apology. And God help me, I kissed her back. Her arms wrapped around my neck, pulling me down into her warmth, the blanket falling from her shoulders. The feel of her skin against mine, soft, wet from the rain, flushed with heat, burned through every ounce of resolve I thought I had left. I didn't even try to stop. It wasn't gentle, not at first. It was desperate. The kind of kiss that knows it's wrong but doesn't care. The kind that tastes like ruin and redemption all at once. Outside, the storm raged, wind howling like a warning neither of us was willing to hear. The fire popped beside us, throwing bursts of light and shadow across her face. I pulled back, just for a second. Her eyes met mine, wide, dark, searching. "I shouldn't," I started, but she shook her head. "We already did." She was right. We'd already crossed the line when I let her in, when I didn't look away, when I didn't send her back up that hill. My hand slid down her spine, feeling each curve like a confession. She trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. Her breath hitched as she guided my hand lower, inviting me into something sacred and dangerous. "I'm not sorry," she said, hoarse against my neck. I wanted to tell her I was, that this was a mistake, that Sheriff Collins trusted me, that I owed him more than this. But the words never came. Instead, I kissed her again. And this time, it was slow. This time, it was careful. We weren't two people caught in the moment anymore. We were choosing it, choosing each other, choosing the fall. Every movement was deliberate, every touch laced with a kind of aching tenderness I hadn't known I was capable of. She pressed her forehead to mine and whispered my name like it meant something holy. Mr. Witt. That's when it hit me, the weight of it. This wasn't just lust. It wasn't just the storm or the cold or the loneliness. It was the part of her that had gone dry and hollow, looking for water. And I was pouring myself into it. The guilt was there, yes, but it was distant, faint, like a church bell ringing on the far side of a canyon. The louder sound was her breath in my ear, her body beneath my hands, the kiss that changed who I was. We collapsed back onto the cot, tangled in limbs and half-spoken promises neither of us would keep. And even then, even in the heat of it,
I knew this wasn't the beginning of something. It was the end. The end of the man I was. The end of the trust I'd sworn to protect. But I didn't stop, and I didn't want to.
We didn't speak for a long time after. She lay beside me, skin glowing in the firelight. A thin sheet pulled up over her chest like modesty could still mean anything now. Her breathing slowed, but I knew she wasn't asleep. I wasn't either. Sleep wasn't the kind of thing that came easy after a night like that. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, just enough to patter gently on the roof. The storm had passed, at least outside, but inside me, it was just getting started. She rolled onto her side, fingers trailing lightly down my chest. "You still thinking about him?" I didn't answer. "I am," she whispered, "but not with guilt." I turned my head to look at her, my heart already bruising from the weight of what we'd done. "Then how?" She traced the scar above my collarbone, where a bullet had grazed me years back. Her touch was soft, too soft, like a woman who's been starving and finally ate. Her words made my stomach twist, because I knew exactly what she meant. There'd been something in her eyes when she undressed. Not lust, not conquest, not even loneliness. It was need. And what we did, it wasn't quick or cheap or wild. It was something else entirely. It felt like worship. And that's what scared me most. Because I didn't just enjoy it, I reveled in it. Every moan, every arch of her back, every whispered plea in the dark had felt holy, consecrated. I'd made love to the sheriff's wife like I'd been sent to do it, and I couldn't blame whiskey or chance or the storm. I'd chosen it. She sat up, letting the sheet fall. Her body was pale in the firelight, marked by life and time, and now by me. I've been alone in that house for 5 years. He's good, fair, but I've never been seen by him. You saw me. I stared at the ceiling, jaw tight. Don't make this into something pure. It felt pure, she said softly. Didn't it? I hated how fast I nodded. She pulled on my shirt, wrapping it around herself, and walked to the fire. Her back to me, shoulders bare, hair hanging loose down her spine. You think he'll know? The words froze me. I don't know, I said. She turned halfway. Would it matter if he did? That hit harder than the kiss, because I didn't know the answer. Would I face the man who trusted me, look him in the eye and admit I'd slept with his wife under his own roof, on his own land? Or would I lie, pretend the storm had come and gone without consequence? Her eyes met mine, tired, resigned, almost sorrowful. I should go, she said. I nodded. I'll walk you back. No. She picked up her wet dress. I came here alone. I'll leave the same way. She didn't kiss me again. Didn't even touch me. She left the bunkhouse quietly, stepping out into the drizzle, my shirt still clinging to her, the buttons open, her figure a silhouette against the gray light of a dying storm. And just like that, she was gone. But what we did, it stayed. It stayed in the smell of her on the cot, in the ghost of her breath on my skin, in the way I couldn't look at the fire without seeing her face in the flames. And deep down, I knew something sacred had been broken. And we'd both treated it like it was beautiful, By morning, the world looked clean again. Fresh puddles reflected the pink-orange spill of dawn, and the hills rolled green beneath a sky that had never once asked what men did in the dark. I stood outside the bunkhouse, boots in the mud, shirtless, watching steam rise from the earth as it drank in the last of the rain. You'd never guess what had happened just a few hours before, unless you looked at my face. The cot behind me still held the shape of her, the smell, and maybe it always would. I poured water from the barrel, scrubbed my face and chest like I could wash the guilt off, but it clung harder than the mud. I went about the chores like nothing was wrong, fed the horses, patched a bit of fence, checked the roof of the hen house where the wind had torn a corner loose. I kept busy, kept moving, like if I stopped, it would catch up. But the quiet was different now, not peaceful, hollow. I caught sight of her mid-morning. She was up near the main house, hanging linens to dry, her hair braided, her posture stiff. She didn't look down toward the bunkhouse, didn't wave, didn't need to. I felt her like a splinter in the heart. Around noon, I brought the mare out for a ride to the far pasture. Thought maybe a bit of distance would cool the burn, but it didn't. It just gave my mind room to turn over every detail. Her voice in the dark, the way she'd whispered my name like it was a secret worth sinning for, the way I'd answered without shame. I'd slept with the wife of the one man in this territory who would have taken a bullet for me. And not just any man. Sheriff Thomas Collins, the kind of man who trusted me with everything he had. I didn't deserve the trust. I didn't deserve the man. Hell, I didn't even deserve the guilt. I should have felt worse, but I didn't. Not all the way. There was a part of me, a small, silent part, that still wanted her. Not just her body, but the look in her eyes when I held her, like I'd made her feel alive again. That was the most damning part, because it meant I wasn't just weak, I was willing. By sundown, I'd made my choice, or so I thought. I wouldn't speak of it, not to her, not to him, not to the mirror. I'd carry it, bury it, and if it came to judgment someday, well, I'd answer then. As the sun dropped low, I spotted her once more, standing on the porch. A soft wind caught the hem of her dress, lifting it like the memory of our night together. She didn't wave, but this time she looked at me. Just long enough, and in her eyes I saw it. Not regret, not shame, but something worse. Silence, the kind that lasts a lifetime.
He returned 3 days later, dust-covered and smiling, with 2 dead men slung over the back of his horse. I was mending a fence rail when I saw him ride in, the sun just starting to dip low behind the hills. The light hit him like something biblical. Tall in the saddle, eyes squinting from the road, a bandage on his arm, but grin wide across his face. "Got 'em both," he called out. "Ran 'em down past the dry gulch. Dumb bastards tried to cross the flats at noon." I set my hammer down and walked up to meet him, heart thudding like it wanted out of my chest. He dismounted with a grunt, boots hitting the ground like thunder. "Damn good to be home," he said, then clapped me on the back with the kind of force that shakes something loose inside you. "Couldn't have done it without knowing you were watching things here." I tried to smile. I did. but my face wouldn't quite cooperate. "Everything go all right?" he asked, leading his horse toward the corral. I nodded, too quickly. "Quiet week." "Eloise keep out of trouble?" I hesitated. He looked at me sideways. "What?" I forced a chuckle. "She mostly kept to herself. Few chores, some bacon, that sort of thing." He grinned. "She's a good woman. Too good for a man like me, truth be told." I nearly told him right then. I could have. One breath, one honest sentence. But I didn't. I helped him unsaddle the horses, offered my flask, listened to him tell the story of the outlaw brothers, how one cried when he saw the rope. Sheriff Collins talked like a man who believed the world made sense again. And I stood there, nodding, laughing in the right places, rotten from the inside out. Later that night, we ate on the porch of his house, fried beans and cured pork, with cornbread fresh from Eloise's oven. She barely spoke, didn't look at me once, but I felt her. Every time the sheriff refilled my cup, every time he thanked me for being the kind of man a lawman could trust, every damn word was a nail in my gut. "You ought to stay here a while," he said, wiping grease from his fingers. "Hell, I could use someone like you on the ranch more permanent-like." Eloise stood to clear the plates. Her hand brushed mine for a half-second. Not by accident, not without meaning. And still, I said nothing. Later in the bunkhouse, I sat alone by the cold hearth, staring at the unlit fire. The cot still smelled faintly of her. My hands still remembered the shape of her hips. And my soul felt like it had been carved out with a dull blade. I should have told him, but I couldn't. I was too much a coward, and just enough in love. And now every kindness from him was a curse, every smile a wound. Sheriff Collins had come back with blood on his hands and trust in his heart, and I had welcomed him with both broken.
Life went on like nothing happened, but nothing was the same. I stayed on the ranch, just like he asked. Helped mend fence, rotate cattle, patch the roof on the north shed. Sheriff Collins treated me like a brother, maybe better. Offered me half a cut on some new grazing land out west. Told folks I was the kind of man you could stake your future on. And every time he said it, I died a little more inside. Eloise kept her distance. She spoke polite, smiled just enough. No more glances, no soft touches, no late-night visits. Whatever we were that night, it had been folded away, locked in a drawer neither of us would open again. But it never left me. One morning, a few weeks after his return, we sat on the porch drinking coffee while the sun warmed the hills. Collins leaned back in his chair, sighing contentedly, eyes half closed. "Funny thing," he said. "Out there, tracking those outlaws, I kept thinking about this place." I nodded, too afraid to speak. "Not the land, not the cattle, just here, home, her." He sipped from his tin cup, smiling to himself. "I ever tell you how I met Eloise?" I shook my head. "Town dance. She was standing alone near the edge of the room. Didn't look at nobody, just stared at the piano like it might start singing. And I knew right then
That was the woman I'd build a life with. He chuckled. Course she didn't smile at me till the third time I asked her to dance. Took 5 more years to get her to marry me. Worth every damn second. I looked down at my hands. They were calloused, dirty, but nothing compared to how filthy my insides felt. I said, "She's a good woman." He nodded, proud. Better than I deserve. Better than most men get. I wanted to scream, to confess, to rip it all open and let the truth pour out like blood from a gut wound. But I just sat there, the sun warm in my face, and said nothing. That night, as I walked past the house, I caught her standing at the window, curtains parted just enough, her face bathed in lamplight. We locked eyes for a moment. Just one moment. But in that second, I saw everything. The silence, the shame, the secret that would rot us both from the inside out. And then she turned away. I kept walking. Back to the bunkhouse. Back to my cot. Back to the spot where I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. There'd be no reckoning, no grand reveal, no justice. Just 2 people who'd betrayed a good man in silence and buried the truth beneath chores and coffee and years. That's the kind of wound that never bleeds. It just brands you. Every time he clapped my back, every time she avoided my eyes, every time the sun rose on a ranch I should have left long ago, I stayed, because I was too ashamed to run and too weak to face what I'd done. And so I lived with it. Not just the betrayal, but the memory of how holy it had felt, and the knowing that I'd never feel anything that pure ever again.